Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Hey guys.
Is one of the
Yesh. Preemptive like, link to the original video, Imperial War Museums, top of the description, Discord below that. Love to have you. Let's go. Let's learn.
The Imperial War Museum's most prized possessions, a genuine, airworthy combat veteran Spitfire Mark I. It was examples like this, alongside the Hurricane, that fought the Luftwaffe during the summer of 1940 to keep Britain in the war. Early Spitfires, like the example behind us, were initially equipped with 8 machine guns. They fired the .303 rifle caliber machine gun round. But much like the Spitfire through its development, not only did it gain...
Eight machine guns?
With 8 machine guns. Spitfires, like the example behind us, were initially equipped with 8 machine guns. They fired the .303 rifle caliber machine gun round. But much like the Spitfire through its development, not only did it gain things like bigger engines, but also larger armament, in the case of the 20mm cannon and the large caliber .5-inch machine gun. The story of the Spitfire's armament development is complicated and can even be considered controversial to this day. To help us tell that story, we've brought in Jonathan Ferguson of Rhode.
Yeah, he's great. I've seen a few videos with him in it.
Who's going to take an in-depth look at the 3 main weapons that the Spitfire would be equipped with throughout the war. But first, let's step back and look at the development of the very first Spitfires.
Cool. I'm excited.
During the First World War, air fighting was in its infancy. Aircraft were developed to carry different ranges of weapons, but even at their peak, most fighter aircraft only carried a maximum of 2 forward-firing machine guns. During the interwar period, planners began to look forwards to a potential future conflict and what might be required. Aircraft were developed, and it was deemed that a minimum of 4 machine guns would be required in any future war. This is evident in the last RAF biplane to enter service, the Gloucester Gladiator, equipped with 4 forward-firing 303 machine guns. But even as the Gloucester Gladiator is entering RAF...
I mean, think about like how big of a deal the plane must have been in warfare, where like a whole new area of warfare is created, where it's like inventing a warship, you know? It's like what you think of is naval power, air power, and land power. It's the creation of this whole new, obviously really important area of warfare.
Service 303 machine guns. But even as the Gloucester Gladiator is entering RAF service, the next generation of fighter aircraft is just over the horizon. These aircraft will be monoplanes, and they will be fast, capable of flying over 300 miles an hour. The Air Ministry realised that these aircraft may only be capable of following an enemy in combat for around 2 to 3 seconds. Only a very short period of time to actually down that enemy aircraft. So enter into our story Fred Hill and his daughter Hazel, who calculate that to put down this required amount of fire, we don't need 4 machine guns, but we need 8. Although 8 machine guns seemed excessive at the time, the most cutting-edge fighter just about to enter RAF service, the Spitfire, was able to accommodate these machine guns, with 4 in each wing spread throughout. So now over to you, Jonathan, to tell us more about the 303 Browning machine gun.
Hi guys, Jonathan here at the Royal Armouries with our wonderful collection of firearms, of course. This is technically a firearm, even though it's mounted in an aircraft, specifically the Spitfire. This is the first and probably most iconic gun used in the Spitfire and the Hurricane, of course, and other aircraft. This is the Browning. This is a Mark II Star 303 belt-fed machine gun. Air-cooled, you basically have to go air-cooled with aircraft guns. This thing is putting out 1,150 rounds per minute. That's a pretty high rate of fire. Good chance of tagging the enemy with some of those shots. The drawback was the round. This is a rifle caliber round, more than capable of killing a person, of course, multiple people potentially. The problem was the size of it. It can only be this big, which means you cannot fit any explosive content in there to really do damage to the fabric of the aircraft. What you're doing instead is putting a sort of swarm of angry bees into the enemy and hoping that you hit something vital. Pneumatic firing system, you can see our cables attached to this one, 2 required for the Browning. A very capable gun, you've got 8 on the Spitfire, 300 rounds per gun initially. That's a lot of rounds at 1,150 rounds.
Guys, how do the cables even work? I wondered this with something as simple as like bike brakes as well. Like, obviously there's a wire connected. Oh. Is it as simple as just you have a wire connected within this to the trigger and you're just squeezing on the other side? Or is there some sort of hydraulic thing?
Per minute. 302 required for the Browning. A very capable gun, you've got 8 on the Spitfire, 300 rounds per gun initially. That's a lot of rounds at 1,150 rounds per minute. So hopefully hit something, but you might find you're hitting, and you're not doing the damage that you really need to do to knock that aircraft out of the sky.
By the time the Spitfire comes into service, it's equipped with 8 303 machine guns, 4 in each wing. But with the increasing speeds and altitudes these aircraft can fly at, some problems come about. One of which is the guns themselves freezing as the aircraft fly at these heights. To combat it, hot air is pumped from the engine through the gun bays to keep them warm, and also patches are fixed to the front of the gun apertures to stop moisture and dirt getting inside. As such, the Spitfire's armament is ready to and also patches are fixed to the front of the gun apertures to stop moisture and dirt getting inside.
And then you just shoot through it. And I love when they solve problems using like stuff that's already being produced in the plane, such as hot air from the engine to then. Love that.
As such, the Spitfire's armament is ready to face its biggest test come the summer of 1940 and what we now know as the Battle of Britain. Following the fall of France, the German Luftwaffe attempted to gain air supremacy over Great Britain as a prelude to invasion. The 3 main single-engine fighters of this time were, on the British side, the Spitfire and the Hurricane, equipped with 8 303 machine guns. On the German side, the Luftwaffe were equipped with the single-engine Messerschmitt Bf 109. And in its latest versions, it's equipped with 2 machine guns and, crucially, 2 cannon. These cannon are able to fire explosive shells. Because the British fighters were equipped with 8 machine guns, they had a higher rate of fire, meaning they could fire more bullets at the enemy in a certain span of time.
Yeah.
However, the differing range of weapons the Germans had meant they had a higher weight of fire, meaning that they could put down an increased volume of ordnance over their British counterparts. So it's clear that this is all about balance.
Just fast forward if you need to.
What the Germans had, in a sense, they had a higher weight of fire, meaning that they could put down an increased volume of ordnance over their British counterparts.
So the bullet weight.
So it's clear that this is all about balance. What is the right combination to use? And it was something that was debated heavily at the time.
Can someone explain that? What weight of fire, rate of fire? It sounded kind of the same.
On both sides of the opposing forces, and is still debated, often with much controversy to this day. But something was changing the calculations on the British side.
What's controversial? God, sorry guys, just please.
To use, and it was something that was debated heavily. Balance. What is the right combination to use? And it was something that was debated heavily at the time on both sides of the opposing forces, and is still debated, often with much controversy to this day. But something was changing the calculations on the British side. That was the increasing amount and prevalence of armour in the German bombers. The hitting power of the 303 was not fantastic, and its penetration ability of this armour was weak, meaning that a higher volume of bullets needed to hit the aircraft to have any chance of bringing it down. As such, the British require a weapon with more hitting power to bring down the enemy aircraft, so they begin experimenting with a new weapon, the 20mm Hispano cannon. And for more information on that, over to you, Jonathan.
Right, now
before we get on this, I remember seeing a video similar to this one about where they beefed up armor on planes, and someone pointed out that where planes make it back to home that are riddled with bullets in certain areas, that you actually don't need to beef up those areas because clearly they can make it back alive with those areas being damaged. And it's the planes, it's where they weren't hit that you need to beef up the armor, because it's survivor bias. It's like, well, all of the planes that were hit in the areas that you need to look at are gone. And so that was really smart.
Now the RAF...
Do you know what I mean?
No cannon. And for more information on that, over to you, Jonathan.
Right, now the RAF takes an enormous leap forward from the tiny little, relatively speaking, 303 rifle round with the Hispano 20mm. As you can see, these are markedly larger, much bigger and heavier, even if you were firing standard lead cord ammunition, ball ammunition. The beauty, if you can call it that, of these is that they can contain a really large armor-piercing penetrator, which is what one of these guys is. So we've got semi-armor-piercing incendiary, that's the red with the white tip. And then next to it, we have the high explosive incendiary that's tearing apart, tearing big holes in the fabric of the aircraft, ripping control lines, tearing through hydraulics, fuel tanks, you name it. That powerful 1-2 punch is how these belts were loaded with these two types of round. The gun itself...
What is a uranium-cased round? Is uranium, or depleted uranium, is it just create a super dense material?
Belts were loaded with these two types of round. The gun itself is quite technically interesting. We won't go into that here. It's gigantic, which is why you can't see the front end. Now, the front end on this is set up for a different aircraft, very late war or post-war. The gun itself is a Mark II, exactly as used in the Spitfire. These big rounds are belted together and initially fed from this 60-round gigantic magazine that the armourers had to hoik out of the wing and replace. Later, they're replaced with 120 rounds belted, feeding through a belt drive mechanism, which is what this is. So that stays on the gun, and the belts are just loaded straight into the wing bays in the ammo containers, and they just feed straight through. So you go from 60 to 120, and then later on, when we have the big Brownings alongside this, you get to 135 rounds per gun. Rate of fire, about 800 rounds per minute. For the most part, you're only going to be having 2 of these on your aircraft. So initially 60 rounds per gun, 2 cannon, initially just those, which doesn't go that well. Then we have augmented with machine gun ammunition as well, and that's the sweet spot for the RAF and for the Fleet Air Arm, is to have a mixture of faster firing, smaller caliber projectiles, and very slow firing, hard to tag the enemy with, but devastating if you do hit them. And that's the mix that works.
The first ever Spitfire squadron, 19 Squadron, was formed at RAF Duxford before the Second World War. During the Battle of Britain, it moves just down the road to RAF Falmere, where it becomes the first Spitfire squadron equipped with cannons. But the Spitfire had an incredibly thin wing, which was a problem when it came to fitting cannon armament into it. The cannon is a larger weapon than the machine gun. It has drum-fed ammunition, and that required the cannon to be mounted sideways in the wing to get it to fit. When these new weapons worked in the Spitfire, they increased the punch that the aircraft could deliver. Unfortunately, they rarely ever did work. The G-forces on the aircraft and the stresses in the wing often caused the ammunition feeds to fail, and the guns regularly jammed, sometimes firing as little as 1 or 2 rounds. 19 Squadron persevered with this new armament, but were more than fed up, so much so that they requested their old Spitfires back. They were actually happier to have clapped out old Mark I Spitfires than their shiny new Mark Is with the cannon.
Guys, imagine you're like in a life or death scenario, and you have a great opportunity to fire at the enemy aircraft, and it jams. Like any other level of frustration in something else jamming in life is probably 10-fold, 100-fold when it's in a war. So
Unfortunately,
that's
they
frustrating.
hadn't got the secret of belt feed mechanism, and we had a little magazine which only...
Sorry.
They had...
Spitfires than their shiny new Mark 1s with the cannon.
Unfortunately, they hadn't got the secret of belt feed mechanism, and we had a little magazine which only carried 60 rounds in each gun, which lasted 6 seconds. And unfortunately, if you applied any G, due to the magazine feed, they stopped. And we kept protesting, because these things should never have been issued in that state. We were just furious that we should be issued with stuff that had obviously never been tested. For a long time, a matter of weeks, with these damned aeroplanes.
As such, experimentation with cannon armament ceased during the Battle of Britain. Cannon armament would only really gain maturity in the wing of a Spitfire by the time we get to the Mark V variant. We've moved now to another hangar here at Duxford, Hangar 2, a hangar that is regularly full of airworthy Second World War aircraft. There is a bit of noise in the background today because it is a very windy day here at Duxford, but we are now with our next subject, Spitfire Mark 5C JG891 of Comanche fighters.
Looks pretty.
From the Mark V onwards, the Spitfire began to be fitted with a variety of different wings. In the case of the Mark V, 3 different wings, the A, the B and the C. First, we have the A wing, which we've already seen on N3200 in Hangar 4, which is only capable of carrying 8 303 machine guns. Then there was the B wing, like here on MH415. The B wing was only capable of carrying 2 303 machine guns and a 20mm cannon in each wing. And you can tell the B wing by the fact that there isn't a separate fairing for an additional gun, and it's got a smaller blister above the cannon barrel. And finally, we have
just such a beautiful piece, just a beautiful thing. Just it just looks amazing, gorgeous.
the C, and it's got a smaller blister above the cannon barrel. And finally, we have the C wing, or the universal wing, a wing that is capable of carrying a variety of weapons depending on its role, either a pair of 303s or a pair of 20mm cannons in each wing, or a combination thereof. The C wing, or universal wing, was incredibly important to Britain's war effort because it sped up manufacture and was far more efficient in its production. This version of the C wing has a pair of 20mm cannons, but that was quite a rarity. Most C wings in service were equipped with 2 303 machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, much like the B wing. And part of the reason for keeping that layout was that pilots liked to be able to sight and attack their target initially with machine guns, where they had more ammunition, before they opened fire with the hitting power of the cannon, where they had less shells. As the war progressed, the Spitfire...
That makes sense. If, you know, you want to just start the engagement, there's no, you know, you could still hit something with the smaller ammunition, and you want to still engage the enemy from a further out distance, then you'd be comfortable using your low ammunition, big hitting guns. So, yeah, that makes sense.
I needed to be up where they had less shells. As the war progressed, the Spitfire needed to be upgraded to meet constantly updating threats from the enemy. In the case of the Mark V, it was being bested by the German Focke-Wulf 190. New aircraft needed to be developed, and that aircraft would be the Mark IX. From the Mark IX Spitfire onwards, the designation A and B were largely dropped in favour of the C, D and E wing. Although a large number of the Mark IXs were equipped with the C wing, British pilots still felt that as enemy aircraft were developed, they still lacked the punch that they needed with the 303 bullets. And that led in the Mark IX to the development of the E wing, a wing that was capable of carrying a 20mm cannon and a 0.5-inch heavy machine gun round. So over to you, Jonathan, for one final time to tell us about the 0.5-inch machine gun.
What we have here might look like a giant 303 Browning, and it basically is a giant 303 Browning. It's the same design scaled up to the 50 caliber, the 50 Browning machine gun round. Still in common use today, and it is absolutely enormous. At this time, it's a very potent aircraft gun used in...
So the only, like, the size of the bullet, it goes to like here, so it's still enormous, but, or is it just this? Or
virtually all of the US. At this time, it's a very potent aircraft gun used in virtually all of the US fighters. And the Spitfire, with its new E-wing in 1944, late 44, gets the ability to mount 2 of these alongside the Hispano cannon, giving it a fair bit of punch. So we're comparing that to the other Browning round, the 303, and it's almost hilariously...
This is about the size of the actual bullet, of the actual, you know, thing here. Like, this is this without the casing yet.
Much, much bigger. It's 800 rounds per minute. It's right between the 2 other guns, and it is 260 rounds per gun, but you only get 2 guns, so you're still a bit low on the ammo count. But it's a great compromise for rate of fire and firepower, because this big old round here, it can be armor piercing, it can be high explosive, it can be armor piercing incendiary, which is a common aircraft round. So many would say this is the perfect compromise. The Americans, notably. The Brits went still compromising with this and the Hispano for the later marks of Spitfire.
So we've heard about a number of wings that the Spitfire was equipped with, the A, the B, the C and the E. But now we're going to go back over and have a close look at a very special Spitfire, that equipped with a D wing. So we've come through to another hangar here at Duxford, hangar number 3, to take a look at another version of the Spitfire. This time a Spitfire with the D-wing. The D-wing actually means it's got no armament, because this is a photographic reconnaissance Spitfire, PR Mark 11, PL 983.
That's why it's the blue.
Very early on in
stealthy.
the Second World War, aircraft were required to take pictures of the enemy, become spies in the sky. And the Spitfire, as the fastest aircraft that the RAF had available, became very useful in this version. For the photographic reconnaissance Spitfires, in the place of the ammunition and the guns in the wings, fuel could be added, which allowed these short-range fighter interceptors to have the legs to reach out over the enemy territory and take photographs as an aerial camera platform. If these aircraft were intercepted by the enemy, they relied on their speed to evade interception. These Spitfires were the fastest of all Spitfires, as they didn't have the weight and the drag that came with armament in the wings. Aerial reconnaissance was incredibly important during the Second World War, developed by all sides, but particularly so by the British and Americans. And really it is photographic reconnaissance that is the backbone to what becomes the Allied strategic bombing campaign. The aircraft behind me is a Spitfire PR-11, PL-983, belonging to the Aircraft Restoration Company. This particular aircraft was assigned to No. 2 Squadron in early 1945 and is known to have flown at least one high-level photographic reconnaissance mission in around April 1945. And the names are part of a sponsorship campaign to raise money for NHS charities. So the aircraft behind me is one of many Spitfires that you can see at Duxford on a normal day, covering the majority of the variants and marks that were produced, from the Mark 1 through to the final Spitfire variant, the Mark 24. This particular variant was equipped with an entirely redesigned wing, exclusively holding 4 20mm cannons, the armament that would take the RAF into the jet age.
I was gonna say, it's such a beautiful machine. This looks amazing. Like, I think the most modern U.S. airplane, aircraft, fighter jet looks really cool though too. It looks like, but something about like the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s airplanes just kind of looked a little ugly to me. Like the little cone shape antenna pointing out. This looks like a muscle car. And then the newest, is it a F-22 a Raptor? The newest airplane looks like a sports car, kind of really cool. But I'm wondering, why isn't every plane this a blue or a silver? What is the point of like ground blending camouflage paint on a plane? Well, could it be for it's harder to spot when they're on the ground, I guess? That might be it. Cool video, guys. Hope you guys are all doing well. Would appreciate any answers to my questions. Would really appreciate it. I'd love to see your comments. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.